Welcome to Good Game, your no BS insights for crypto founders.
People get this causation wrong. They think that I shill Solana because I have Solana bags. It's like, no. I have Solana bags because I believe in Solana.
Yeah.
Okay. And the reason I believe in Solana is because when I was obviously at Coinbase and I saw all these different chains, I saw like a disproportionate focus on the user and the customer experience and the product, and how you didn't have to wait 5-6 years for the chain to scale, because I don't have that long, right? I don't know what I'm going to do in 6 years. I want to build things that help people today, not hope that they will be useful in some hypothetical future of mass adoption of billions of users, while we don't even have like really 1 million users, I would say, or certainly not users, maybe farmers. But so I don't know which one wins. On a tangential point, I do think that entire meta is completely broken and nonsense.
I feel the same. I feel so jaded by the infra bullshit that's happening right now. It's counterproductive. It's counterproductive to Ethereum.
And VCs are promoting this too. That's the annoying part.
Yeah, I like to call them out when they do that. Hasn't been too helpful for me, but I think it kind of needs to be done a little bit.
It needs to be done.
Yeah.
Looking for your next startup idea in crypto? Check out our request for startups list and get inspired at alliance.xyz/ideas.
Welcome to Good Game. Today we have Mert from Helius Labs.
Oh God. Yes. I
Helius
am
Labs.
Mert. Yes. I woke up this morning and then I saw somebody actually made an account of the guy that they say he's my special brother. It's OXMURT, and he's like drooling. So that was fun to wake up to.
Yeah, I saw that last night. and I think somebody from our one of our startups replied and said, like, who did this?
When I posted, it was like 4K market cap, and now people have done some bad things to that token.
Yeah, I think it went up to like 500K or something crazy.
Yeah, I don't understand how this stuff works. I hold none, by the way, so I'm not behind this in any way.
Awesome. So we have Mert, the founder of Helius Labs, on. Obviously, if you know Mert, he is one of the largest proponents of Solana and its ecosystem. And we'll just dive deep into the upcoming trends that we're seeing. And, there's a lot to do with like modularity thesis versus monolithic, MEV comparison between ETH and Solana, shitcoin trading. And, maybe we could dive deep into like the optimism sale and how we feel about that. But yeah, those are some of the things that are top of mind. Qiao?
I mean, you mentioned pretty much everything, but I'm particularly curious about your view on Ethereum, because obviously you are like in general, the Twitter image is different from your people's real image in real life. Obviously, you're in the Solana camp and you criticize ETH, but I'd love to hear you basically steelman Ethereum for our audience and make a fair comparison between Ethereum and Solana.
Sure, yeah. I think it's quite easy to steelman Ethereum just because that's why I first came into the industry to begin with, right? Like I was at Coinbase, I was building on Ethereum, and Coinbase has like a few products, for example, like the MPC wallet, which is built on Ethereum. I helped build that.
When was that?
Coinbase?
Yeah.
Like I joined about a few weeks before they went public. So like April 2021. And I was there for like slightly over a year. And yeah, so like Ethereum, I'm kind of going to steal Anatoly and his framing on this, which is that like Ethereum kind of proved out the concept, right? They were first to market. They pioneered the entire thing of smart contract platforms. And they obviously learned a lot during that time because they were the first. And when you ship to production, you learn a lot of lessons. And they did that. And they had to pivot a bunch of times, right? Like the merge, and now this new roadmap with all the splurge and all the other names.
Fiverr.
Yeah. And I think once you have a certain amount of activity on the chain, like the amount of TVL that they have and the amount of mindshare they have, you kind of just structurally have to slow down, right? Like there's no other option. It's kind of the curse of getting too big or just getting bigger in general. It just happens with companies as well. And now they have to scale via offloading some components that Solana believes should be at the L1 off-chain or to L2s or other layers, etc. And now my main criticism of this is that it's too early to do that. Not that it shouldn't be done at all. But like if I were to steelman Ethereum's case, they have a lot of activity. They're steering a trillion or very, very large ship. And they have to do it to make such that everybody, like they don't shoot themselves in the foot. And using L2s is a relatively easy way to do that. Obviously, they're now adding 4844, which they're essentially building the L1 to suit rollup. So it's like a semi-modular, semi-monolithic chain, right? Like it's not either or currently, it's kind of in the middle. And I think that approach will work, right? I think rollups work. I think they make sense. And I think they specifically make a lot of sense for Ethereum, which doesn't have any other options other than to improve the L1, which is just going to be too risky to do at this point, in a drastic way at least. So I think for them, it makes a lot of sense. I think that's kind of the Steelman, which is that like the path that they took kind of makes it such that this path actually does make sense for them currently. I do think the structure of what they're doing has led to some side effects that I don't think are being acknowledged much. So like L3s, for example, right? Like I do not care for those, right? Like and you can kind of see Vitalik maybe walking back a little bit. He made a post, I believe like 2 weeks ago. He's about 10x less confident or something, or 3x less confident that offloading everything to the L2 was actually the right call, and that some of the things actually should be improved at the L1 layer. And the analogy I like to make for this is like, okay, so you make a race car, right? And you just whip out some engine, and then you start optimizing the hell out of the wheels and or the tires and the aerodynamics and all this. Okay, now that you've done that, physics now has caught up with you. You can't make the car go any faster. Now you have to upgrade the engine. But once you upgrade the engine, now all the other parts don't work in harmony. Now you have to change all those dependencies as well. Okay, so that's what I don't like, because I think that's going to happen.
So on that comment about Vitalik, honestly, I've been feeling the same way in the last year or two. I come from the Ethereum world. My biggest bag is ETH. And so I can say this. I think that it was probably a mistake to offload everything to the layer 2. And I say that as from the point of view of a user. So Imran and I both degen on-chain every day. We take calls from 9 to 1, and then after that, we start degening on-chain and try various products, like basically the entire afternoon, every single day. So we have a pretty good feeling for where the really good products are. And I really think today, Solana UX is a 10x improvement over Ethereum. And it's a combination of meaningfully lower fees and not having to bridge. It's really that simple. Bridging just causes me a lot of stress. And the fees, I mean, for me, it's okay, but for the masses, it's not going to be good enough.
I mean, the average person can't bridge. They don't even understand that concept.
I can't even bridge. Yeah. Like my co-host, we were talking, because I also have my own podcast, Dan, who's like an analyst at Blockworks Research. He was talking about how painful it was to like bridge to all these different things. And he's an analyst. He does this most likely more than anybody. So like my point has never been that rollups are inherently bad. It's that they're being done too early.
Yep.
Especially if you take the point of view, like a longer time horizon. It's like, okay, crypto is going to be around for hundreds of years, decades, whatever, some long time horizon. And we're in like smart contracts have been around since Ethereum, so like a few years. Why are we creating this much tech debt this early if we actually have a long time horizon? It doesn't really make sense. And like, yeah, I agree that Solana is a 10x improvement, obviously, right now. And the interesting part about that is it does that while also itself being quite broken right now. Like Solana is half not working right now, and it's still quite impressive. And so like that, and the reason I say that is because, okay, if that were to be fixed, what would the difference be then at that point at the L1, right? So
you actually predicted at the end of the last year that Solana was going to go down at least once this year. Do you still have the same prediction for the upcoming year or two? And if so, why is that? Like on a technical level, what makes you think that way?
Yeah, I think it'll go down again. Actually, I don't think this. I have 100% conviction that it will go down again in the next year. And there's multiple reasons, but the gist of it is that there are a lot of changes that are proposed for the base layer that are massive changes. So obviously Firedancer is one, like an entirely new validator client is a huge deal. If you rewrite the entire stack in a different language with new people, you're going to miss something in there that's going to cause a bug. It might be like a very small bug, like an insanely tiny bug. But the problem is Solana validators, once they detect something is off, they'll just stop on purpose because they prioritize safety over liveness. And so they'll just stop. And then that's like, for example, currently the fees are relatively broken. And there's kind of two things we can do to fix that, or we're doing to fix that. One is like when you send a transaction, the transaction gets scheduled to by literally the scheduler. and it's kind of jittery right now. So there's some randomness inherent in that process. And in the next release, 1.18, it's being reworked totally to be more deterministic. It's like, okay, that's going to be great for the chain once it works, but will it work without any bugs whatsoever? Obviously, we all like to think yes, but I've done software long enough to know that all software is somewhat broken on some level. And then there's also like other people like Firedancer and maybe Margin Finance who are like not satisfied with the networking protocol on Solana. So like everybody knows like TCP and UDP and whatnot, or most technically would at least. Solana uses something called Quick, which is like Google's version, and people don't like that and they want to rewrite it. And it's like, okay, if they do rewrite that in a better way, it will help the network for sure. And that's what makes Solana like on the bleeding edge at all times. But that's a huge change, and it's very hard to make changes like that and guarantee that nothing will go wrong whatsoever.
Regarding Firedancer, 2 questions. 1, do you have a timeline for when it'll happen? And 2, what's your estimated TPS throughput improvement?
I think estimate. I know the team, so I don't want to stress them out too much, but let's say early next year.
Okay.
Early next year probably seems reasonable enough. Okay, and then the TPS question is actually much more difficult than it sounds, because it's at the end of the day, block space is a market, and I'm basically trying to predict a market here. It'll depend on how complex the transactions are, right? Like transactions might have different compute units, which might affect TPS. It'll depend on the economics for bots. So currently on Solana, you can span the chain for pretty cheap, I would say, and you don't really get punished. Totally is now propose adding a new mechanism called SIMD 110, which makes that super expensive. If that goes live, that totally affects the TPS. But that's kind of maybe the nuanced, long-term, boring answer. Maybe the lizard brain answer is I would expect like 10K TPS or something in that range within a few months. Yes, within a few months of it releasing. And then the question is because the Firedancer actually will reduce hardware requirements somewhat. And it's like, okay, will it be such that more people at lower hardware requirements now validate the network? Or with this new improvement, will people increase their hardware requirements even more? Because that part's not clear to me. It's also not clear how the rollout will happen. So there's a lot of uncertainty. But the part I like Firedancer is much, not really because of the performance, but because of security. Once it goes live, then we can kind of sleep slightly safer at night, knowing that if there is a catastrophic bug in the Solana Rust client, we have something to back up to, and we don't have to spend like a month rebuilding stuff. Okay, so that's why.
Just to complement on what you just said, so Ethereum with 4844, 2 months ago, when I talked to the Ethereum folks, a lot of them were bearish 4844. But if you look at the prediction market today on how much 4844 will reduce fees, it's quite a bit. It's like 10 to 100x. So if the prediction market actually plays out, then basically in 2 weeks, Ethereum layer 2s should be on the same order of magnitude as Solana in terms of fees. But then with Firedancer, Solana becomes the bleeding edge again. So we'll see. It's going to be very interesting to see.
I don't think 4844 will result in 100x improvements. I think like the prediction market is a fun thing to play with, but like the liquidity behind those things is, I'm not going to use them to make any conclusions. I saw the Optimism team did, and then I also saw that the Scroll and Polygon teams both were like, actually, this is maybe a little overrated, and it's not going to be that good. So it seems like there's some disagreement there as well. And so I have a prediction about this as well, but we'll see how it plays out. I do think 4844 is a little overplayed.
What's your prediction on the fee reduction?
I think for sure it'll reduce fees, right? Just by structure of the technical concept there. But okay, like when that happened in some other chains, people just did inscriptions and just filled it up, right? Will that happen? And if that does happen, what happens? Will they increase the blob space, or will people use Celestia or Eigenlayer? Like what's going to happen there? So there's a lot of variables. And by the way, these L2s are still, I believe most of them are still single threaded. Like the fee for the rollups might change, but the fee for the users, it's not super clear what that will look like. Like if there's a huge, hot, congested like mint, that's still going to affect the dexes.
Yeah.
Okay. So because it's not localized, there's no hotspot contention or isolation.
Going back to your earlier point regarding bridging, we're starting to see a lot of consumer apps. And there's a thesis out there, especially in the Ethereum community, that consumer apps that are built native on layer 2s can capture their own mindshare users without the worry about liquidity. And you're seeing this with Friendtech as an example, right? Friendtech you could easily onboard to Base and, easily send ETH to your wallet and then start to interact in Frontech. You're also seeing this on Fantasy, which is launched on Blast, which is kind of like a social trading app.
Mm.
And so there is also another thesis that's separate from this, which is consumer adoption, consumer apps that are built for consumers can also bring in a whole slew of users. What are your thoughts on that narrative?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's correct. I think that is what will happen. Now, the question is, where will those apps be built? And will they be built on Base, Blast, or something like a Solana? And if I look at the concentration of talent today, it's being built on Solana. So you guys obviously know Tensor.
Yep.
But, Tensor, Magic Eden, Phantom, Drip, right? There's a lot of Helium, High Mapper. There's a lot of consumer talent that's building on Solana. And it's like, okay, I agree with the premise that obviously consumer will be the best. Like people will just onboard directly to there, especially with something like a Base, right? Like you're on Coinbase and you can directly on ramp to Base. That's easy. Assuming you have Coinbase, which international people surprisingly don't really use Coinbase as much, especially, which is actually pretty under discussed, I think. But okay, so then the question is like, okay, if I'm a consumer app, where am I going to build? I don't feel that they would build on an L2 on pure technical merit today. I think it would have to be because of incentives or some sort of political alignment.
Ethereum alignment.
Ethereum alignment, yes.
Because like one, your margins as a business are just going to be worse by an order of magnitude at least. Even with 4844, your margins are going to be worse. For example, Drip subsidizes the cost for their users to mint. Yeah. On Solana, you can mint like 1 million NFTs for like $100. You cannot do this on any L2, not even close. But like the general idea I'm trying to convey is that the margins on Solana will make a huge difference. But then also there's a lot of other stuff on chain that you can kind of compose with on Solana. Whereas on Ethereum, if you built on Base, it's not so straightforward to compose with Blast or another L2 as opposed to something else just as a contract on Solana.
So there's a narrative which you tweeted about and you mentioned it earlier, which is layer 3s. And the narrative is actually quite strong on Arbitrum. So Arbitrum launched kind of a layer 3 component called XAI, which is currently valued at $1 billion valuation in the public markets. And there's tons of games that are building on layer 3s. And the reason why they're building these games on layer 3s is the fact that they're getting grants. And they're using these grants as a way to subsidize the cost that you mentioned. And it's turning out to be a positive flywheel from what I'm hearing and reading. Mm-hmm. And so this is happening on Optimism. This is also happening on Arbitrum. And, Base as well launched layer 3s using Arbitrum. So there's this interesting kind of way where they're using tokens from all of these kind of networks, from Optimism to Arbitrum, etc. And that's trickling down to Zai. And Zai now has a token. Now they're using that also as a bounty to reward layer 3s to build on their app. And what they bring in return is grant money, a ton of it, and then also some, existing community that will automatically use these apps moving forward. So that's kind of what's happening in the layer 3 world. So what do you think about that?
I think a lot of people disagree with me on this. Actually, people from Solana as well. But I just think paying people to use your stuff is really stupid because basically you're just causing a reality distortion field where you don't know what's real and what's not real. Are people using your thing because it's really good and because they really need it, or just because you're paying them for it? And you can't really listen to what they say with their answers either, because they're also now biased with different incentives. So like I actually asked this to Tolly a few months ago, I believe, on my podcast. And I was like, so what do you think about like Polygon BD? Because I actually called out Polygon BD like 2 years ago or something about like, okay, here's the difference between the two chains. Solana or Polygon pays people to use the chain versus people pay Solana to use the chain, like in terms of the BD. And like Sandeep and stuff, that's when all the Twitter drama happened. But like now you look at it and it's like it's kind of played out. And basically the philosophy is if you build something so good, people should be paying you to use it. You shouldn't have to pay them to use it. Now, obviously, if you want to bootstrap some sort of ecosystem, like a gaming ecosystem, you have other tools at your disposal, like tokens. Okay, sure, go ahead. Maybe that'll help align incentives, right? And if it's done for purely aligning incentives, okay. But just based on what I've seen from the tech will not get there for, let's say 3 to 4 years. Like when does like Dang sharding go live, right? That's not going to be for a while. So then maybe are they going to use Celestia? Are they going to use EigenLayer? Are they going to use Polygon Avail? There's so many different complex questions there. So I do think like it's kind of a gamble. It's like, okay, I'm building on this chain because they're paying me. or I don't know if I call an L3 a chain, but I'm building on this L3 because they're paying me, but will it work? And will my product be affected as a result? So I obviously run an infra company, and I've received a lot of DMs, and I still continue to receive a lot of DMs from L2 teams building on L2s or other chains coming over to Solana because their stuff just doesn't work there. Now, the spots where it does work, so like, I don't think actually games need to be built on Solana necessarily. Like, I don't think most games need globally shared state. I think isolated state for some games is totally fine. In that case, if the tool is right for what you're trying to achieve, do it. It doesn't matter what you're using, what chain you're using for that. But make sure the tool is right first, because the token price can only hide that for so long.
When do you expect to see a layer 2 on Solana?
Like an L2 that settles on Solana?
Are you insinuating Drip's tweet the other day?
Yes.
Qiao?
Yes.
Okay.
So I actually run Drips Infra. I talked to them. I know the context of that tweet. Basically, Vib is not happy with the congestion on Solana, which he shouldn't be. Like it does suck, which is what I said earlier. It's half broken. L2's on Solana. So I mean, there are two SVM rollups that settle on. Well, actually, one's not live, but SVM rollups that are going to settle on Ethereum. I've actually talked to teams who want to use Solana as a DA layer as well. So that's the two, let's say, heads of the modular thing. Now the third one is, okay, will people settle on it? And, there's like Code, which is that payments app, which kind of uses it, Solana, for this. They're like a soft sequencer where they just settle payments at the end of the day or at the end of n intervals. So it kind of is already using it as an L2. But when do I expect, I actually was asked this question by VC yesterday, I believe. And I think within like 7-8 months, and it purely due to market conditions, right? Like I think the market will take up and people are like, I bet I could raise money from this because I'm the first to market here, right? Yeah.
Every VC I know is pushing their portfolio company to go from a dApp to a layer 2 now.
It re-rates their valuation.
Amazing.
Yeah,
it re-rates
10x.
their valuation.
Yeah,
It's all what it is. I mean, just like spinning up another Amazon AWS server, right? I mean,
but there should be an economic reason. Like if Solana gets really congested and the fees go up by 10x during a peak bull market, there would be an economic reason for someone like Tensor to do a layer 2, right?
Yeah, I think so the question is, these proposed fixes to mainnet, when will they actually land? If they're going to land in a reasonable time frame such that teams don't need to do this and they can stick it out, then okay, they can wait. But like if it's going to be such that it's 2 years, then obviously it doesn't make sense. And I would probably advise them to just not use Solana mainnet at that point. But like we won't let it get there. We yell it totally enough.
So if, let's say, a Jupiter or like a top 5 Solana app goes layer 2, do you think the Solana cabal would be happy or upset? And how would they react?
And L2, what kind of L2?
That settles on Solana.
Okay, so if Jupiter were to become an L2 that sells on Solana, I do think people would be okay with that. I think they'd be relatively whatever. Like I don't think I think Tolly would obviously have his thoughts about how it's not necessary, but then he has like a different time horizon than Jupiter, for example. So I think that's fine. I think what people wouldn't like is if the L2 was selling on Ethereum using something other than Sol, just because of bag allegiances. I don't think I would personally care too much. Just get the job done. That's all I really care about. Like, I mean, you saw this with Eclipse, right? Like when Eclipse launched, the problem with this is that it's not an isolated idea like channel. It's like if Solana people feel neutral about it, but then like Bankless tweets like, oh, Solana's going to die now because there's an L2. Now they're going to get mad that people are saying this, and they're going to hate, just from necessity, they're going to hate the L2 based on what they think they should feel. Which I saw this happen because I think like one of the Bankless guys was like, oh, like Solana is going to die because of L2s. And then now Solana people start hating the L2. And I'm like, no. The L2 is a good thing for Solana because it spreads the usage of SVM tech and it's open source tech. That's what you want. But when Twitter and money are involved, things do tend to get lost in translation.
So Qiao tweeted this a couple weeks ago, and I still think about this till this day, which is when you have layer 2s that launch their own token, then there's a DA layer that launches its own token, then the app launches its own, or then maybe a layer 3 will launch its own token, and then the app itself will launch a token. So you have all these tokens.
And the sequencer and the restaking.
The sequencer with espresso. And the question is like, if your users are mostly farmers, which is true, then they're going to figure out like, where are they going to spend the most time, right? And today, there's 2 places. One is shitcoining on Solana, right? And obviously like Tensor and all the other great products that sit around that ecosystem. Then you have farming, right? Opportunities with Eigenlayer and all the other kind of infrastructure projects that are out there. And given when Celestia launched, I mean, to be quite frank, I was surprised it went from $1 billion to $17 billion. Like that caught me off guard. And so people are seeing that kind of like wealth effect and they're like, well, I want to catch the next Celestia. And so they're spending a lot of time on the infrastructure side. So the question is like comparing these two, it seems like they're, you know, at the end of the day, it's like you're competing to acquire users. The question then is like, which one wins out and how does it win out?
Well, I don't think they're actually competing to acquire users, right? And I've tweeted about this quite a few times, which is that I don't think those are users. Those are just, I don't know what to even classify those people. Like just farmers is fine, I guess. But like as a founder, your market is not the set of people who want to make money. That's not a market. That's just humanity. That's everybody who's ever lived. Okay, you need to segment your market correctly to begin with. And if you segment it as such that people who want to make money, you're not going to get PMF, like, because what is your market? What is your product? So I think first of all, you need to get very clear on who your market is, who the ideal customer segment is. I think Jito did this super well. I was staking on Jito before I thought they even were going to do an airdrop. I didn't even know how, if they would do a token. And I was already using it. And then they airdropped like a few months after. And then now I'm actually interested in the governance proposal that they put up because now I have some stake. So now I'm their user. Like I actually use them now. And they targeted me correctly. Like if you compare it to the airdrop farming meta thing, I think it's just like spray and pray versus spray and pray. I don't know which one of those wins, like because none of them are doing it in a calculated or methodical way. Like if you show us like Jeff Bezos or some Web2 CEO, they'd be like, what the hell is happening here, right? Like you guys haven't segmented anything properly. You're just throwing money at people and seeing who bites. And so I don't know which one wins there because I don't think they're even playing the same game. Obviously, I'm biased, but people get this causation wrong. They think that I shill Solana because I have Solana bags. It's like, no. I have Solana bags because I believe in Solana.
Yeah.
Okay. And the reason I believe in Solana is because when I was obviously at Coinbase and I saw all these different chains, I saw like a disproportionate focus on the user and the customer experience and the product and how you didn't have to wait 5-6 years for the chain to scale because I don't have that long, right? I don't know what I'm going to do in 6 years. I want to build things that help people today, not hope that they will be useful in some hypothetical future of mass adoption of billions of users while we don't even have like really 1 million users, I would say, or certainly not users, maybe farmers. But so I don't know which one wins. On a tangential point, I do think that entire meta is completely broken in nonsense.
I feel the same. I feel so jaded by the infra bullshit that's happening right now. It's counterproductive. It's counterproductive to Ethereum.
And VCs are promoting this too. That's the annoying part.
Yeah, I like to call them out when they do that. Hasn't been too helpful for me, but I think it kind of needs to be done a little bit.
It needs to be done.
Yeah,
but you raised a round recently, right, Mert?
I did.
Yeah. Congrats on the round.
Thanks. Yeah, I actually raised it before Breakpoint and before the price went up, and I was like, I'm going to help the ecosystem be able to raise money and whatnot. But then the price went up, and everybody started raising.
And I imagine you make quite a bit of revenue. I don't know if you're cash flow positive yet, but sounds like you're.
We do make money. I do like to. I try to run the company in as much Web2 way as possible with like tried and true non 0% interest rate. Like if you look at our cap table, actually, you'll see that it's pretty like Web2 and people who were around before 0% interest rates who didn't get like weird muddy advice, who don't give muddy advice. And so I do believe that it's super important that you're able to generate real revenue as a crypto company, and then you can progressively decentralize, right? Like, because you can't just run RPCs and be centralized forever. That wouldn't really make sense. I think like Moxie has a post on this from Signal from like 2 years ago, right? It doesn't make sense. And like Infura is kind of doing this now. They got PMF. They have a lot of users. Now they're looking at decentralizing. Same thing with Helius, right? Like at first we want to iterate as much as possible, move super fast. And once stuff starts ossifying a little bit more over X time horizon, then we can look at decentralizing and making it part of the network.
Wait, so there's a token?
I don't know if there'll be a token. There might be a token. There's other ways to decentralize, right? There's many other ways to for example, email, right, is decentralized. It's a protocol. And I tweet something to the extent of like, which infra tokens have been pulled off successfully a few times per year. And currently I haven't seen too many. I think some people have PTSD from the graph. which is a good company, but I'm not sure if the tokens really work that well there. So, it's not decided. I know it has to decentralize, but do you use a token to help with decentralization or not? I haven't decided.
Infura, a while ago, started disabling users from like sanctioned companies, right? Or sanctioned countries. I think I saw a tweet somewhere about Iran and other places.
Mm-hmm.
How are you thinking about it when you go decentralized? Are you going to take more of a regulatory first approach? Are you thinking about just more like crypto native decentralization first? How are you weighing the options there?
Well, currently, I obviously have to do what is required of a US based company. There's not really a choice there. You just do what the law requires you to do.
Yeah.
But obviously, I'm in this industry because I believe in crypto and some of the values that come along with it, such as liberty, freedom, etc.
Yeah.
And so the end goal certainly will be to get as close to that as humanly possible. So if that were to happen, I'd be super unhappy about it. I try my hardest to make sure it doesn't happen. But ultimately, you have to obey the law, obviously.
Yeah.
But maybe going forward, there's other, like, for example, Coinbase obviously has to comply with regulations and laws, but they can also go and ask for change, go to court, all these things, right? And so I think it's tough. And I do think this is like partly why most talent is leaving the US in some sense.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I'm in Canada. So actually, it's kind of really weird here. Actually, Tensor's from Canada too, so you guys would know.
Half of Alliance is Canadians. I'm
Including
Canadian.
Qiao.
I'm Canadian. Jacob's Canadian. Will's Canadian. Half of the research team is Canadian.
Nice. Yeah. So, I mean, you guys must have seen that in Ontario, like what was a year and a half ago or something, like trading over 30K of anything but Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, or ETH Classic, I believe, is not permitted on Ontario exchanges. I thought that was hilarious.
I wanted to touch on a couple things. One is you mentioned the MEV comparison on Ethereum versus Solana. Recently, I think one of the validators made like $340,000 on a trade, which was insane by accident.
Yeah.
But I noticed something else, which is like, Jito started earning more fees than Solana, at least that one day, right? And you had some thoughts around it. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that versus Ethereum, obviously, because Ethereum, it's the opposite, right? Like fees mostly accrue to Ethereum and then MEV afterwards.
Yeah, but like those fees are actually generally from MEV activity on Ethereum. Like Jared from Subway is a core contributor to people's bags, I would say. And okay, so Solana's MEV scene is very interesting because Solana by default doesn't have a mempool. I'm not sure how technical the audience here would be, but so obviously without a mempool, MEV would be pretty difficult. So what Jito's done is they approached Solana, the client, the software client, and they've added a mempool. And people seem to maybe try to villainize Jito here a bit, but I think that's nonsense because this actually used to happen unofficially. Like people would have these deals with validators in unofficial channels, like, hey, I'll pay you X if you do X with your validator, like block packing.
Like a bribe.
And and so now it's democratized, or at least it's on the path to being more democratized, right? So MEV, like some random L1s will reply guy me and be like, oh, MEV is robbery, we've eliminated it. It's like, no, you haven't. So you just don't have any activity to cause MEV. Or you've randomized block packing, which incentivizes spam. So you haven't eliminated anything. And then the question is, okay, it's if MEV can't be eliminated, what can you do with it? Well, obviously you can democratize it. You can make it such that it's aligned with the incentives of validators, such that validator economics are better. And that is happening, right? So for example, you gave the example of a validator yesterday was tipped like $40,000, granted for a faulty trade because somebody was trying to game Jito. But that's a lot of cash, right, for just existing as a validator on the network. And I think one thing that's happened is the ecosystem integrations are lagging. So that is to say, like if you go to a DEX and the slippage rating by default is relatively high, that slippage rating is basically what you will get because people will take advantage of that discrepancy and you will get a worse price. So I think as long as you're aware of that, it should be okay. But people just aren't aware of it because MEV is pretty new on Solana. Shitcoin season kind of just happened all of a sudden within the last month. So I think after some education, some better integrations, deeper liquidity, and I'm also working with Jito to potentially look at an MEV protected RPC. For people who obviously want to be protected against that. So once like those steps are taken, I think the state of the ecosystem will improve in terms of MEV.
Oh, that would be nice. A MEV protected RPC for Solana.
Yeah.
So it would just go straight, the transactions would just go to Jito's mempool and then process from there, right?
You would send it to Jito, and then Jito would be basically you trust them to not put it into the mempool.
Okay. So it's like a private mempool of sort.
Yeah. Well, like Solana doesn't have a mempool, so they would just skip the mempool altogether. There is other ways you can do it. Like you can actually just land a Jito bundle yourself as the RPC provider, but that gets super expensive. And Solana hardware margins are, let's say, not so great to begin with. So that'd be kind of tough.
I wanted to go back to some of the bullshit that you've seen recently. I know you call out on a few on Twitter as well, but why don't we call out the bullshit? Anything related to fundraisers or projects or narratives that you've seen recently?
Oh, man.
I think one you called out was optimism.
Wait, you called out optimism? For what?
Yeah. I call it optimism quite frequently. I do like Ryan a bit, which sucks, but like he joined after, so not my fault. So one of the things that I really didn't like recently was, and it's generally been centered around optimism. Like Adam C tweeted something like, well, like Base is going to win because Coinbase and such. And basically my tweet was like, I think you like severely overestimate how fast these large public companies can move versus these missionary startups, right? And I was referring to Arbitrum because I think Arbitrum has moved super fast. They have proofs working in production, which seems to be a quite big differentiating factor. Their multi-sig that governs the L2 is not anonymous. Arbitrum or Optimism is. And they have things like Orbit and these L3 integrations. They have Stylus, right? They have more of the activity. And so then I looked at that and I was like, why would Coinbase go with Optimism instead of something like Arbitrum, which is more advanced technically, has more traction, has more users, all this stuff, has been battle tested more. And then obviously the answer is alignment, right? Yep. Anyways, that caused some, let's say, Twitter debates. So I didn't like that, how people were picking, like, in a space that's supposed to be valuing security and decentralization above all, people are still going back to their ways of like, oh, they gave me a lot of money, so I'm going to use it, even though it's much worse tech that's going to not be as good for users, especially as the biggest player in the crypto. That's not to say I don't like Coinbase. I love Coinbase. They are my biggest holds in terms of public markets by a ton. I'll leave it at that. I don't think they've approached the L2 thing is how I would approach personally. And then, Optimism, I think like yesterday, there was like a forum post about how they sold like 100 millions. The token is, I think, 19.5 million tokens or something. I forget the exact number.
I think it was
20.5.
Yeah, it was like $20 million or $100 million.
The actual dollar value in the market is like $100 million.
$100 million. Okay.
Yeah, but they sold it to an undisclosed buyer at undisclosed terms, and nobody knows anything.
Second time, by the way.
Yeah,
and so like a year and a half ago.
I didn't know that. And so it's like, what exactly is the point of this token? Like, are people governing? Like, did anybody vote on this? Was anybody like, what's happening here? It's just, so you combine that with a multi-sig that's anonymous. Nobody knows who's on the multi-sig. And the fact that there's no fraud proofs. So like if somebody just does something funky on the chain, who's going to challenge it? Nobody, because the proofs don't exist. So now you cascaded or stacked these like ridiculous trust assumptions. And then now you're using all of that and you're saying this is the future of France. And you're, let's say, talking down to not just Solana, but like Arbitrum. Okay. It's like, I don't understand the intellectual inconsistency there. So that bugs me, and I talk about it frequently. Another thing I saw yesterday or 2 days ago, and I'm not going to name the team because I think they're a good team. I think they mean well. But it was something like somebody raised a round, and on the top left, it was like the modular chain for like X trading. And then I was like, why the hell are you including the term modular in your company's slogan? Right? Like if your entire purpose is to enable better trading, I don't just say the microservice powered Twitter. Okay. Like I don't need to say this. It's because what matters is the products, the customer experience. So if you're just adding the term modular to your product, I'm going to doubt your intentions there, that you actually care about the user as much as what that name itself enables for your bags. So
I think the whole modular narrative is getting out of control. And frankly, that goes back to my original comment about Ethereum going to layer 2 as a mistake. So if you really think about it, all these new things that are happening to be it layer 2s, restaking, well, not restaking, layer 2s, DA, share sequencer, all these things are tech debt from the fact that the layer 1 doesn't scale.
Yep.
If the layer 1 scales, you don't need these things, at least not now, right? Like Solana doesn't need these things yet. All these things happen because of the inability to scale at the base layer. And then with all these things come with a new narrative, which is the modular and then tokens and the airdrops and that stuff.
So, okay, I agree with that. But if Solana is getting congested, right? I mean, there's already like people talking about layer 2s on Solana, and it's like the Overton window slowly moving towards the world of modularity. Could there be a world where Solana turns out to be in Ethereum's position, where you see different layer 2s and this kind of modular ecosystem being built around Solana? Is that a world that we could see?
Depends who you ask. I think Anatoly would disagree with that because he doesn't think once you've isolated the hotspots, it doesn't, like, what is the rollup going to do? That's kind of his belief. I would say, like, again, going back to the beginning of this episode, I'm not against rollups or L2s at all. What I'm against is premature optimization on an industry where your time horizon is supposed to be much longer than this. So, and then people use like the example of like JavaScript was built in 10 days with somebody who's on just severe amounts of coffee or drugs. And it's like, okay, that's like a totally different thing. That's a programming language with a lot of people working on it. There's no security assumptions, etc. So, okay, the question is, could Solana be in that position? It's like, yeah, absolutely. But like Solana already does much more TPS at about 6 orders of magnitude less fees than Ethereum. About 5 million was when I looked last. So even that as a starting point, if you were to do L2s on top of Solana, those L2s are already giving a much better spot, right? I do think like the only reason you would use Ethereum today is take advantage of the existing liquidity and network effects of the assets and the users. That seems to be like the best case for using Ethereum to me. On Solana, I think what the sequence of events is roughly, you fix the bot problem, you fix the non-deterministic transaction problem. Once you do that, and then you add Firedancer, which optimizes everything from the ground up, you then have some idea of the absolute limits of how much you can push this thing. Okay, once you understand this, you can either add more cores because or increase hardware requirements or do something on the vertical side, or you can start maybe adding some asynchronous execution stuff, which you can actually do directly on the L1. You don't need an L2 for this. But or you can just do an L2. It's a permissionless network. People can do whatever they want. If they want to do an L2, go ahead. Code has already done it. So I think I'm in, and I think I'm like one of the only ones. I'm totally fine with L2s being on Solana. I don't think Totally is, because it's obviously his vision is a global state machine where information is synced ASAP, as fast as physics allows. That's what he wants to build. It remains to be seen if that is kind of the biggest market for people who will actually build on Solana. So there's some market conditions, obviously. But I think it'd be fine. But again, the main point I want to get across is that the premature optimization is what's annoying. And maybe we're wrong on L2s, but are we also wrong on L3s? Right? Like, why are we now going to L3s?
Yeah.
Especially if Vitalik is talking about how if L2s were possibly a mistake to offload everything to them, why are we now offloading stuff to L3s? And StarkNet actually has a blog post where they have L4s for privacy. I'm not kidding. You can look this up.
It's all a narrative. And, it seems like the two hottest narratives right now in crypto is meme coins and AI. And meme coins, all right, they make
AI
sense.
is a meme coin as well.
Exactly. And I guess maybe we could touch a bit on that if you'd like. Is what do you think about crypto and AI? Is it legit? Is it a meme? Is it ahead of its cycle?
I mean, like, so I majored math. I did applied math, and I actually wanted to do like a PhD in either theoretical physics or machine learning. And I was doing that all my undergrad. And then I built some stuff on my own, like some deep learning algorithms. And I was like, okay, like this has some potential. But at the end of the day, this general AI stuff is quite, like, they're almost completely different things. Like, I don't see how we get there in a reasonable time frame. And I look at some of the stuff today, and I mean, LLMs are awesome. ChatGPT is great. Gemini, we'll see. Midjourney, Midjourney is awesome. I use Midjourney a lot, and so AI itself is super useful and awesome. I don't really understand what problem the crypto AI intersection is solving currently, right? Like, because obviously, like, everybody knows that what you should do is you should look at the market, identify the gaps, work backwards, and build something to solve those problems. Okay, so what problem are we solving right now with this AI crypto intersection? People will say like, oh, you need to show like integrity of this thing wasn't fake content. It's like, okay, you can do that without crypto, by the way. I don't like, that's just cryptography. You don't need a token to do this. And the one part where I do think it makes sense to intersect these two things is like DePIN and GPU clusters, right? Like if you have extra GPU capacity on your computer, as you want to build this protocol where you're leveraging the P2P network of like people, like a BitTorrent, where you want to utilize other people's resources to train models and GPU heavy stuff, and you maybe give them a token to incentivize that, like a render. I think that's probably okay. Like, I think that makes sense. I don't know the exact business model there, but I think fundamentally the concept makes sense because it's been around before. It's been around since BitTorrent. So I think that's like the one part where it makes sense. In other words, or in other cases, I simply am not knowledgeable enough to make any judgments. So I also have a fund. I do invest in, based on the pitches I have seen, I do not see a focus on solving problems that actually exist. So that seems to be
the focus is to launch tokens.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then, okay, so the other topic, which is meme coins. I wrote a post on meme coins like a few months ago, which actually I believe somebody from Alliance was not happy about it. I forget his name.
Jacob.
Yeah.
I gave him shit afterwards.
We all did, by the way.
So, like obviously meme coins are generally zero sum. Like that's just obvious. Like I think you don't have to say this. It just goes without saying. Meme coins are just a way to, let's say, Tushar, I think Multicoin says it well, which is that we thought like the gaming would be like skeuomorphic, like AAA kinds of games, but this is actually Web3 gaming in a sense, right? Like people just, speculate on funny things, and sometimes they make money, sometimes they lose money. They know the risks. Hopefully they know the risks, but I don't see how they wouldn't, like, especially if you're bidding on Joe Biden. Like you must know that this is not necessarily.
Are you long Biden?
I don't buy any meme coins except for Bonk. And the reason is because, that brings me to Bonk, right? Bonk is like the example I use in my post. And it's because, I was here during the December 2022, like FTX aftermath, and people were like shitting on the chain and stuff. And Bonk was like this set of people who just distributed a fun dog token to everybody for no real reason other than to just cheer them up in a sense. And it turned out that so I distributed some developers, and now it's worth $700,000, which is, I don't even know how that works. It was worth like $900 at the time, and my CTO like instantly sold it. But what the meme coins do is a few things. One is they help, depending on the meme coin, they do help DeFi teams tighten up their integrations, right? Like, because you have to add these different tokens and different token standards. When on Solana, there's quite a few of those. They do stress test the network quite a bit. And people like me about this now, but like Solana in 2021 was like this wild chain where people were just aping NFTs the whole time. And that broke the chain numerous times. Like, everybody knows the outages. What you might not know is the outages were because of NFTs, because people would just bought the hell out of the network and overwhelmed the block leaders. And so Solana now learned from that, and now is a much better chain for this cycle, right? So like, obviously people will speculate, gamble. That's just a market that exists, and you might as well serve it. But it also has a lot of interesting benefits for the chain and the ecosystem teams within that chain. I think like people have this misconception that like, oh, like we're inventing a casino and stuff. It's like, no, the casino already exists. Okay, we're not inventing human nature. It already exists. Now they're just doing it here. And we can use that for good, or we can use that for bad, but it's not inherently a good or bad. There's no value judgments to be made there. And then the other part of this that I really don't like is when technical people like CEOs or engineers are like, oh, I spent all my time building this important stuff, but now people are just aping meme coins. Why should I do this? It's like, if you have to ask yourself why you should do this, you shouldn't do it anyways, okay? Like, ideally, you have some mission you're trying to accomplish. You're trying to solve a problem, and these meme coins won't affect you. If they do, then maybe your mission wasn't as important as you thought, okay? And people will say like, oh, well, these people are getting attention, so I can't get attention. It's like, no, it's not like a physical resource, right? Like there's no finite amount of attention. You can get attention if you're solving a useful problem or if you're building something interesting for your users. In fact, you can do what Saga did, Solana Mobile, and use the meme coins to help start some flywheel and get more attention for your product, sell more of it, and bootstrap some sort of cash for building other stuff. Like, anyway.
Who said Bong is a meme coin? Bong is a DePIN token for Saga, and it generates revenue. It has a price to earnings ratio. It's a real coin.
That's correct. Yes, it's. I don't think Helium and High like everything being called DePIN, but I do think it does generate revenue. And like the team behind it, most people don't know them, but they're like competent people. Like I know them. They're talented.
What are your favorite apps on Ethereum?
Does Firedancer count? I use Firedancer quite a bit.
It's on Solana now.
It is. So like the way it works is kind of weird, but it basically doesn't use the blockchain in a sense. Like it kind of doesn't. I'm not sure if I want to call it an Ethereum app or Solana app or whatever. But yeah, I think Firedancer is awesome. I did like FriendTech when it was kind of in its phase. I haven't really used it since. Oh, I tried using Fantasy, which is on because I was on it. I was like, what the hell is this? What am I on? And that seems cool. Now it did ask me to do like some verification for like verifying for like this testnet airdrop, I think. And I was like, just no chance I'm doing this. But like it looks cool. So I think there's potential there.
All right. I think we're at time. Mert, great seeing you, talking to you, and learning more about how you think about Solana.
Mert, the only thing I would want to add is I think our industry need more people like you. Because I don't think at this stage especially at this stage of the bull market, a lot of things are getting super absurd and ridiculous. And there are the percentage of people who are actually mission driven is lower and lower at this stage of the cycle. So it was really refreshing to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for calling out the bullshit.
No worries. I've been telling more people on Solana, like the Tensor founders and whatnot, like just you guys are smart. Just talk. Just put it out there. People want to hear from you. So hopefully that starts happening more and more.
And if you want to catch Mert, he has a great podcast called Lightspeed. And I think episodes come out every 3 days or 4 days roughly. So really good content. So would urge our listeners to check it out.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yep. Thanks, Mert. Take care.
Thanks, Mert.
As always, the views expressed in the Good Game podcast are personal to the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of any other person or entity. Nothing here should be construed or relied upon as investment, legal, tax, or other advice. Thanks for listening to Good Game. Don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you next week.